last evening was a miserable evening for most of us. It was a miserable evening as we watched, as all other programs were canceled. I don't know, I don't have cable. Perhaps you were able to get some other kind of news, but it was no news. It was a complete blackout of what was happening, so that we really didn't know what was happening. But television was able to carry on that no news for hours, telling us nothing. And calling out the retired generals and retired admirals, who some of us are getting tired of hearing their old experiences and old war horses, and telling us about what was supposed to happen or not happen. It was a miserable evening and forces us to think about what our life is focused on. When the president asked us to stop and pray for the troops, I stopped and I prayed for him. And I prayed for the president of Iraq. Two men who are responsible for what is happening in the world today. And somehow, in the confusion of patriotism and flags waving and supporting our troops, somehow we are carried along and are sometimes unable to keep our minds focused on what we truly believe. And I have a difficult time with that. We have some of our young people there in the midst of that battle that's going on, I presume is going on. And I am being told to be proud of our troops. And I am proud of I was proud of those children before they joined the army. And I feel very badly for the parents and the wives and husbands and the brothers and sisters and the cousins and all those who are here who are so worried and concerned for the safety and the very life of their family members. We've got to keep focused. It's hard to do because people want us and somehow to drag us along with them. And to say to be patriotic means that I'm all for this. I support everything you're doing. And I have to say I don't support what you're doing. I don't support that. You had a chance to stop it. You had a chance to stop it. And you insist. You insist on extermination. You insist. Because of some kind of rhetoric and some kind of imagined theories, you are carrying on the death of many, many people. I had a difficult time keeping focused in these last few weeks. It depends where you're standing. When we talk about the Middle East, who decided that that was the middle? Who decided it was the Middle East? Depends where you're standing, doesn't it? Depends where you're standing. To those who live there, it's not the middle. It's not the middle, it's the center. It's the center for people of Iraq, and Lebanon, and Syria, and Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, the people of that region of Jordan and Israel. That is the center of their world. We say the Middle East. Who decided it was the Persian Gulf when the Arabs call it the Arabian Gulf? It depends where you focus your attention and where you're coming from. And we have to be sure where we focus our attention, to where we center ourselves. You know, the sad thing about February's Black History Month, and I certainly commend the Education Commission for all that it tries in so many different ways to remind us of this history. The sad part of it is that it's history has been written from someone else's perspective. The history of this country has been written from the perspective of those who landed here, who took it over, and said, this is our country. When the Native Americans could write a whole different history, because they were here, and it was their country. And so we have to come along, we have to say, wait a minute, you forgot something. You forgot about some troops who fought in the Revolutionary War. You forgot about people who invented this. You forgot about people who did this. You forgot about people who wrote this. You forgot about it. You forgot about it because you were writing it from your center of history. And so it's very important how we center ourselves, where we think we belong, and where we think our world is around us. And so Jesus knew that. Jesus knew that people were going to come along and say, that's the Middle East, because we're the center. He knew that people were going to come along and say, this is our country, when there were others who were part of this country, and who had a history long before they ever were brought to these shores. And Jesus knew that. So he took John and Peter and James up a mountain. And he took them there and he didn't say anything. But somehow that day, at that moment, he focused their attention and centered their life on him. He was transfigured. I don't know exactly what that means, but somehow he became shining and bright. And his clothes became so bright that you could hardly look at them. And it's something that perhaps movie directors and producers try to show in some of those mystery movies, where a person begins to shine out. And he was dazzling to them. And there was a voice from the heavens to affirm that and say, this is the center of your attention. This is my beloved Son. I'm pleased with him. He's part of me. We are together, so listen to him. And Peter was so overcome that he said, we got it. His focus was so much on that sight of Jesus that his life became so centered on God and all that God meant, then he said, we got to stay here. There was Moses with Jesus. There was Elijah. It's like the old retired admirals and generals coming along. You know, like we keep seeing here today. The old retirees coming along and patting him on the back and saying, yes, we are, this is the way it is. But Jesus was the center. God was the center. Peter realized that, and he said, Lord, this is so good. I finally realized now what is the center of my life. Now we know. Now we know how to focus our whole life. And everything comes from this. He said, let's stay here. Let's stay. This is it. We've reached the mountaintop. And no, Jesus said, we've got to go down. We've got to go down. But Peter, James, and John, you now know the center of your life. Now you know. And now we can go down the mountain and we can live. And we can do whatever has to be done. We can face death. We can face life. We can face opposition. We can challenge this world with the gospel. And we can help people to focus their attention and to see the center of this creation is our God. It's Jesus Christ, the center of our life. You know, we're very fortunate. I think very lucky, that I'm able to come to church. And you know, so many times we say it's not because we're better than anybody. There are far many people who are far better than some of us out there that never come. But somehow we feel that we need to be here. There are some that don't need to be here. And sometimes some young folks, I know their parents worry about them. They say, don't go to church. But it's hard when you're young and you feel strong and you think there's a lot of things that take up your attention, and I don't worry about it too much myself. But there's not necessarily that need, but the experience with life and the confusion of life and war and all the kinds of things that happen in our lives, all those kinds of experiences push us to the center, to find the center of our life, to find out what is the meaning of our life, to find out that God and that Jesus Christ, who so many have found out, is the center, is the focus. That's where I came from. That's where we came from, and that's where we're going. And those are the ways, there are ways to get there. We're fortunate. We're fortunate to come to hear a gospel, to see how Jesus centered people's lives. To tell us what is the truth. To tell us that when we leave here today, we're not alone. That when we leave here today, God is with us. And even if God has to walk with us in these next few days or weeks, and if God himself cannot stop this war, then perhaps the only thing that God can do is to weep with us. But somehow we've got to keep ourselves focused. We have to keep ourselves centered. And we have to keep saying what we think is the truth. That we have to keep saying what we think about war, and what we think about the violence that's going on, and the death of so many people in Iraq, and the death of our own allied troops. We've got to think about that. We've got to keep challenging ourselves and challenging the world to spend as much time and energy and money and people to spend as much time on making peace as we do in war, of defending ourselves with ways to solve our problems rather than with weapons. We've got to keep thinking that. We've got to keep centering ourselves. We're fortunate to be here. We're fortunate to be here at this Mass, which focuses all our attention on that altar and says that bread and wine, simple bread and wine like us, simple ordinary people, simple bread and wine becomes Jesus Christ. And we go to each other with a kiss of peace and we say, the peace of Christ be with you. Be centered in Jesus Christ. Focus your attention on God and Jesus in you. And we recognize Jesus not only on the altar, but in each other. And then we come and receive that Eucharist, that body and blood of Jesus. How fortunate we are. How fortunate we are. We're just as fortunate as James and Peter and John, who went up the mountain and saw Jesus centered and transfigured before them. That happens to us every time we come, so that we too can come down from this mountain, go out and live what Jesus preaches and teaches and lives. Let us stand.